to start recording. So I guess Farrick is going to join us late for a few minutes, he says.
It's because he hates Bishop Barron.
Oh, okay. Well,
George, you just spilled food all over your chest.
I did not.
God,
Went
things,
back and went back
things
all
have
in.
not-
old people do that.
We're
Things
back in
that-
freshman year of high school at Our Lady Queen of Angels.
Well, it's all those discussions about Charlie Barr that have triggered that.
oh, he was a neat freak, wasn't he? God. No, I know.
No, exact opposite.
Yeah. I don't think he laundered his cassock in the 4.5 years I knew him. I mean,
He may not have.
Reeked of cigarette smoke, remember?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and he smoked a lot, unfiltered Pall Malls, I believe.
And there was another priest we had for English.
Brother Reedy.
Flynn
no,
was
I don't
a smoker too.
no,
Yeah,
I think.
all we did was memorize
Father
every day.
Flynn.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That
that wasn't
Flynn,
Reedy.
okay. Flynn, God, I'm trying
Dennis
to think,
Flynn.
what did I,
Short, round guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Just
He used
made
to
us
take it,
cry.
he used to take a pitching wedge and a golf ball out on the grass outside the classroom.
Yeah.
Walking around out there, working on his chip shots. I remember that, yeah.
Where he'd play handball.
Did he?
Yeah, he'd hike up his pant legs all the way up to his knees and go at it.
Well, so did Wong. Wong played handball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There was a good guy.
Ong Lee. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, well, Father Daspit was very good at it too, right?
Daspit? I never saw him play.
Oh, yeah.
Daspit was Latin.
Yes.
Yes.
So when he entered the classroom, he always said something. And what was it he said?
Good morning, Domne.
Domne, you illiterate.
Omni, all right.
And
But it
Where
wasn't
did
one,
the
it was in Latin.
Laudum Domine Miserere Nobis come in?
And I'm sure you all remember when he walked in and we started the prayer in Latin and we answered with the response to the end of the class.
We're done.
Then he
Mhm,
got up and left.
mhm.
And he
So
came
what-
back in about 10 minutes later.
So what-
And we never thought we could get away with that.
Yeah.
What was his
Worked.
parting comment? What did he say as he left the classroom? There was some Latin expression, wasn't there?
Probably
Valete.
Valete.
I don't remember.
I don't either.
I don't remember.
Let me
He
ask
was
you guys,
yeah.
let me ask you this question. Did you guys continue to take Latin all the way through college, or did you stop like after sophomore year in college, or did you, how many years of Latin do you guys have under your belt?
I don't remember taking any. Latin.
One in college. It was called Latin composition.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Oh, we were still down.
No, I'm wrong. I'm
No,
wrong.
I think then our books were in Latin.
Mm.
And now
Right.
Yeah,
read
well,
4 years of Latin, then weren't our books in Latin? I think I know.
Gret
more.
was in Latin and
Huh?
Gret was in Latin
Philosophy book
and
Yes.
and theology, those were all in
Yeah.
Latin.
You're kidding me. You are kidding.
no, the books were
Yeah.
in Latin.
That's what produced an illiterate generation of priests,
Yeah.
Well,
Hey.
speak for yourself, Crook.
Well, I wasn't a priest. I was just,
No,
you know,
but I mean, yeah.
I remember Ned's great enthusiasm on the day he was ordained a deacon, subdeacon, at the prospect, which was Christmas or near Christmas.
November,
It was
wasn't it?
always
Tom?
in November. The diaconate was in November, George.
November, yeah.
Well, and
Deacons
I
at the
remember him waxing eloquent about what he was sure would be the joys of saying the office every day in Latin.
Latin, yeah.
That was a subdiaconate.
Yeah, that's what I
Right.
meant.
That was at the end of the year. That would be in May.
Yep, that was before our break between 3 and 4 theology.
Right.
And so when did the breviary stop being printed in Latin?
I don't know.
I think, well, sometime after the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah, it was
Maybe
not
it's
too
still-
long after when they, I'm trying to think, probably around 1970,
Oh,
as I can remember, I think we all were right in the first, I mean, among the first people to send Hawks. I still have a copy of it actually somewhere, a letter requesting permission to say the divine office in English. And that was somewhere around 70.
Unbelievable.
I didn't know you had to do that, Tom. My
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, at that point, it was necessary to seek permission.
So
Well,
Tom, do you read the Divine Office, all of it today? I just use morning prayer.
I do morning prayer and office of readings, and then in the evening, we combine evening prayer and the mass. Because
And what?
I usually celebrate the mass with my friend Karen here,
Oh, okay.
who has, so what we do is combine the evening prayer with the mass. So we do the Psalms and then the mass and the intercessions from evening prayer, and then as a Thanksgiving after communion, do the Magnificat.
beautiful. Good for you.
And it works quite nicely. And I always use iBreviary
Yes, that's easy.
online thing.
You don't have to worry about what book to use and
Right.
who's,
And
yeah.
and the nice thing is it has a page where you can compile all of your mass texts for the day, so you don't have to be running back and forth to various places in order to find them.
The only reason I asked, whenever we all took on, at least at that time, and they said the diaconate, and Ned did the same thing, to say the breviary every day. And
Yeah.
that was the first thing that went out the window.
And as a mortal sin, if you didn't.
Yeah, I got a lot of them.
And
Yeah.
Fox will say
Yeah.
the reason why so many,
Those are George, those are the least of them.
I was about to say precisely that.
Yeah, they're the least of them.
yeah,
Does it still purport to bind the diocesan priests under penalty of sin?
I
The
have no
obligation?
idea. I
Well-
have no idea.
the obligation is there. Nobody is emphasizing eternal punishment as a result, however.
Just wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. Yeah,
Well, you wouldn't want to guess wrong.
I trust the Lord.
that says the ultimate guesser. You know, the point is, no matter what you do, what we have to do, I think, is simply plan to say yes to anything we're accused of, and Lord have mercy.
That's a good approach.
You can't really, you can't really defend yourself against God, for God's sake.
Oops, I just got a flash from the Washington Post. Rittenhouse was acquitted on all counts.
Oh my God.
Oh my,
Well, I sure thought there was a reasonable doubt. I didn't follow it that closely, but
Oh, yeah. So the 17-year-old's mother loads him in the car, leaving from Illinois to go to Wisconsin, and he carries along an AK-47. And she says, "Oh, Kyle, aren't you a sweetheart? We're going up there to protect." What bullshit.
that's what he thought he was. That's why he went.
well, we
Yeah,
may,
but excuse me. What kind of planet does the mother live on?
Well,
Oh, son,
so-
let's take this AK-47 that you're not legally able to own.
well,
Let's get you 15 or 20 clips of ammunition, and I'll just drop you off. And I know you're going to be a good boy. God bless you. Bullshit.
well, she
Well-
lives on a Republican planet.
But that
That's
doesn't
true.
mean he's guilty of murder. I mean,
Yeah.
it could still be self-defense.
You know, in the weekly dish, there's a very good discussion about that. What's his name?
Sullivan?
Sullivan brings up all kinds of stuff. He really excoriates the media. He says the narrative that is just imprinted in for instance, the New York Times, who got it wrong over and over and over and over again. The kid really was defending himself. He was afraid for his life because some guy came up to beat him up. And the kid that did that admitted it in court.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Tim?
Yeah.
Well, that's the kid with the Glock you're
Yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah, right. I'm not saying that he he didn't go to the school with good intentions. What with
Well, he was a vigilante. He was a volunteer, no question, and I mean, maybe the feds will prosecute him for crossing a state line with a forbidden
Yeah.
weapon or something. I don't know.
Well, as in O.J. Simpson, maybe the family will sue him and he'll lose that.
in civil.
Well, that would be a tough case. You mean one of the dead guy's families?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrongful death. Let's see, I was trying to take the defendant's gun out of his hands, and he shot me.
Well,
And I'm
remember,
dead now.
remember the burden of proof for a civil case
Yeah.
is lower than beyond a reasonable doubt.
When that's what brought OJ down. Thank
That's
God.
what brought OJ down.
Right.
And I was a juror 2 years ago in a case where I was firmly convinced that the guy was innocent and he was probably set up by his gang. And I believed he was innocent because he was a former gang member who was employed at Homeboy.
Oh, whoa.
And I only found out about that when two of the Homeboy people came to testify that, to his character. And of course, the prosecutor used the fact that he was in a program of anger management as evidence that he had an anger problem. And, there were just so many little holes in that case that in the jury, I kept having to argue that the prosecution has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt because there are other reasonable alternatives. That this guy may have been framed, may have been set up. He may have been misidentified because the only eyewitness who testified was the victim's sister, who only saw him in the dark. And yet probably if I had not, it ended up in a hung jury because there were only about 3 or 4 who were able to be convinced. So I caused a hung jury, and then he was tried again about 6 months later and sentenced.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I think, given all that you hear about, okay, they may be the minority of cases, but nonetheless, they're very real, of prosecutors simply, doing whatever they can with the evidence in order to get a conviction.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you guys remember Willie Galt?
Yeah.
Well,
The
I
runner?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Football.
I actually represented him by his regular attorney had a conflict or something and referred the case to me. And all I had to do was go to federal court and make an appearance. It was against the Olympic Committee. the issue was, could Willie Galt still compete as an amateur in the Olympic games when he's already signed for the Chicago Bears at the
Okay.
time?
Right.
And it's the nicest guy, you
That's what I was
know.
going to ask you. What did you think of
Oh,
him?
I loved it. Betty and I wound up taking him and his wife to breakfast at the Pacific dining car on our way to court. That was when I had a Ferg credit card.
You were trying to impress him.
No, I just wanted a good meal I could put on the law firm. But he was a sweetheart.
A
He really
sweetheart.
was.
A sweetheart, and I was asked to be on the jury and was put on the jury in a federal case against Willie Galt, a real con man of a lawyer who was in prison at the time that Willie's trial was to take place, had conned him into becoming the president of a corporation that would manufacture very, very bad devices, which were being represented to retired football players with aches and pains and all kinds of PTSD. I don't mean PTSD. I mean the
Concussion, whatever.
yeah, brain trauma. And the machines didn't work. But Willie was convinced by this lawyer that he would be doing a wonderful thing for his retired brothers. And so he became president and was just trusted the lawyer and his minions. And he'd have papers brought to him and put in front of him and said, Willie, you got to sign this thing. You're the president. And this is going to bring A, B, C, some really great stuff. And ultimately, the federal government sued him. And in Orange County, most of the jury was, and they had a list, a menu of violations of federal law that they wanted to convict him of. And we walked into the jury room afterwards, and I worked my butt off to, get them to think and not just look at Willie and his color, because they were. And while he was this football hero, he was also part of some kind of not a conspiracy, but an attitude with respect to making money and trying to become successful at all costs. And ultimately, he got convicted of 2 counts of some minor issues, but they were going to take him to the cleaners. They just wanted to get him in prison and keep him there for a long time. They thought he was worse than the lawyer that had convinced him to become president of the.
Really? Well,
It was really something.
I knew
had
him
their minds
probably
made.
10 years before that, and I didn't know him well. I just, met with him once and then went to court with him another time.
Yeah, I'm all for consequences, but when you create a narrative like the media does so often, or your mind is made up because of bias, prejudice, whatever the hell you want to call it, then you really got to step up and do something about it.
Ned,
That's Tom did.
what is this thing that you're talking about, this guy Sullivan?
Andrew Sullivan is a gay guy who's a practicing Catholic who loves the Catholic Church and has what do you call it? It's not a blog, Tom. A weekly
Podcast, maybe?
No, it's
written.
Newsletter,
it's on email.
Okay.
newsletter, probably.
Yeah, and he sends out this letter. It's his motto is something like trying to biased but fair is he says, number one. And then he says, trying to discern the truth that's right in front of your face that you usually can't see. And he's very, I believe, fair, he tries to be as objective as he possibly can. And as a gay man, he would be expected to, and he knows he's being expected to, and he is left of center, but he's also, I think, looking for the truth. And in this last thing that he sent, he just really excoriated the media for the narratives that they put together. For instance, for Ritterhouse, the climax of that whole trial was when the guy he shot said, "Yeah, I brought it on myself. I threatened him. He didn't do anything to me until I threatened him."
That's kind of a good break for the defense.
Yeah, yeah, that's your Hail Mary completely.
Yeah, that's right. To ask the question is Hail Mary, and the guy said,
Then the guy
My
catches it.
my son just sent me a text. He had sent one a few days ago saying, "I can't believe this piece of shit, Rittenhouse and blah, blah, blah. And I hope they convict us, et cetera, et cetera." My son is of somebody of strong views, left of center. And so I called him and I said, "John, I hate to tell you this, but I think there's a reasonable doubt, I think." So here's the text he sent me right now. "Well, looks like you get your wish, Dad. Now this punk will probably run for Congress and be a GOP superstar." So,
Well, you know darn well Trump's going to have something to say today about it.
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Speaking of having something to say, a half hour's gone by and we haven't prayed.
Whoops,
Oh my
Ay,
God.
Dios mío.
let's not miss that.
I think Gary should do it.
Well, I did, I've got on another screen here,
Oh, wonderful.
the Merton's prayer.
Great.
Would you
Wonderful.
like to go ahead
Yep.
with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good. I vote yes.
Okay, can you all see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And would somebody like to lead?
You.
You lead.
In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I'm doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire to please you. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to make my journey alone.
Beautiful.
And so we ask this through
Wow.
Christ our Lord.
Amen.
How
Amen.
apropos, given this study that we're doing with
I
Barry.
thoroughly agree. Perfect lead in to the Dante's Inferno.
Hey, Tom, could you send that prayer?
I think I did include it,
Oh, did you? Okay.
the
Wonderful.
version of it in the last email, that
Okay.
last very complicated email. I have to simplify things. I have a plaque hanging on my wall that I'm looking at that says simply simplify. And I need to do that. Are we ready to go into Baron?
Sandra, you there?
Sure.
I'm ready.
Hang on. Sandra wants to see what you guys look like. Come here.
Oh my,
Look
Well,
over my,
as long as they can't see
look over
me.
my shoulder. This is, all right, this is Tom Welbers.
Okay.
He's the handsomest of the group.
We
This
can't
is-
see, we can't see Sandra.
we need to
I
see
think
Sandra.
somebody took exception to that.
There she is.
Oh, that's really.
Hello,
awful,
Sandra.
Tim. You can't
And
do
and
that.
there's Ned,
Hi, Sandra.
and then Gary on the right, and then John Grammer and Mr. Crook there.
Hey, y'all just don't know how much Tim is getting out of this reunion with y'all. It has been a real revelation, and I can't think of a better gift to give someone who's 79 years old. And
good.
here, you know,
He's made his
back
share
to
of
his
contribution.
childhood and the people he loved when he was young, and still is thrilled to know, or again to know. So, thank you.
Good, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And it gets him out of your hair for 2 hours.
Yeah, it does. Yep. Thanks, babe. Thanks.
Okay, I'm leaving.
We all feel
Yeah,
that
as you
way.
see in my,
Hi, Sandra.
He's been
we-
wondering where you were.
I'm glad you did
Oh,
that,
good.
Tom. I mean,
No, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. yeah.
but she says, what do these guys look like? And I said, well, they all are handsome. They haven't changed in 60 years. And so I pulled out, I think either our junior or senior year pictures. And she said, you were a dweeby looking guy, she said to me, you know. So anyway, Thomas, go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
I don't know, do you want to try, let me see where I can find. I got so many pages open here, that's the problem. And I can't find it. Damn. Oh, Google Chrome. Okay, there it is. So you want to try Dante number 2?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
sounds
Okay. I think you should be seeing the shared screen, and here's.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I have to change the sound for you to be able to get it. Hold on. Where is it? There it is. Sound. System.
Boy, you take Windows seriously.
marvelous text itself.
Apple.
Let
Are you
me
getting
just
it?
Read to you the
Yes.
opening.
Yes.
So Canto 1 of the Inferno. Midway along the journey of our life, I woke to find myself in a dark wood, for I wandered off from the straight path. First of all, midway, I told you he was born in 1265. The poem is set in the year 1300. So Dante is 35. Now, for biblically formed people, go back to the Psalm. How long is the lifespan? 70 years, or 80 for those who are strong. And so for the medievals especially, 35 was midlife. But notice how Dante says midway along the journey of our life. So right away, he's drawing everybody into the story. It's about him and his kind of midlife crisis, but it's also about all of us. There is something about midlife when the things that used to satisfy us, the paths that used to bring us where we want to go, the strategies that used to work, suddenly don't work. They don't bring us where we want to go. We find ourselves lost. Again, for many years of doing spiritual direction and counseling, hearing confessions, I know a lot of people somewhere around midlife who feel exactly this way, alone and lost in a dark wood, having wandered from the straight path. Notice something too, he wakes to find himself here. The implication was that he was asleep. Now, in the scriptural tradition and more broadly spiritual tradition, waking and sleeping is a great metaphor. Waking means spiritual attention. I know what's going on. I'm alive. I'm awake to what's happening. I'm alert. To be asleep, it's a bad thing. Think of the disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. They're sleeping while the Lord is intensely awake to what's happening. Awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will give you life. So waking up is key. Dante had fallen asleep to
Sorry.
some of the deepest values. He had lost his way. I think of long trips I take out here in California. I get sleepy behind the wheel sometimes. That's a really dangerous state to be in because you can easily lose your way. That's where he is. Now listen how he goes on. How hard it is to tell what it was like. This wood of wilderness, savage and stubborn. The thought of it brings back all my old fears. So he's sitting down here to write the story. Even remembering that brings back his fears. He goes on, a bitter place. Death could scarce be bitterer. Now, what I want you to see is this man is commencing this great epic in a sort of suicidal depression. He's at midlife. He's wandered away from the right path. He's alone and lost in a dark wood. Death could scarce be bitterer than the state he was in. This is not a guy having a mild problem. This is a very serious existential crisis that Dante's in. And I brought in a text here because I've always loved this comparison. Arguably the great American novel, Moby Dick, Herman Melville's great book. Listen to how it begins. Famously, Call Me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. And he said, well, okay, it sounds, benign enough. The guy's going to go on a nice little, sea voyage. Well, listen to him. It is a way I have of driving off the spleen and regulating the circulation. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it is a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, and especially whenever my hypos get such an upper hand of me that it requires a strong moral principle to prevent me from deliberately stepping into the street, then I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. Now, what's this man talking about? This is a guy in a major suicidal depression. This is my substitute for pistol and ball, right? I find myself walking behind every funeral I meet. I'm pausing before coffin warehouses. This is not someone going on a nice little, joyride at sea. This is someone who's in a suicidal, damp, drizzly November in his soul. And he will need this great journey across the ocean to deal with this crisis. Well, that's exactly where Dante is now. Just go back several centuries, change the rhetoric a bit. It's not a sea voyage will go on, but rather a great spiritual voyage, as we'll see all the way down through hell, all the way up purgatory and into heaven. But that's how it begins. Listen now, here's the next little stanza. How I entered there into the dark wood, I can't truly say. I had become so sleepy at the moment when I first strayed, leaving the path of truth. There it is again, isn't it? I'm asleep. I'm like in a delirium. I don't know where I'm going. For Thomas Aquinas and the great medieval theologians, to know your end, your goal, what's the purpose of your moral action? That was key, to be alive and awake, alert to it. Dante had lost it. However, there's a little bit of good news. I raised my head and saw the hilltop shoaled in morning rays of light sent from the planet that leads men straight ahead on every road. So what's he seeing there but the sun, right, the great illuminator, and it's shining on this hill, and he says, oh, there is the way, there is the path upward. I'll be okay. I know I'm lost, but there's the way forward. When you're dealing with someone in counseling or spiritual direction, it can happen a lot that they understand they're kind of lost. They're in serious trouble, morally or spiritually. And you make a couple little clarifications with them. You say, hey, maybe you should try this. And they can be filled with an immediate enthusiasm. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. I figured it out. Remember that crazy movie, Analyze This? Remember when Robert De Niro plays the mobster who's in a psychological depression, and he goes to see Billy Crystal, the psychiatrist, who says a few simple things to him to clarify where some of these feelings might be coming from. And De Niro goes, yeah, you are a genius. You have solved my problem, Doc. I feel great. And he leaves the office. Well, of course, he isn't great. He got one little hint of how he might make progress. But what's needed? What's needed is a long and steady and difficult journey. Dante sees the way forward, in fact, going up the hill, and the hill in question is the Mount Purgatory. But he's got a lot of work ahead of him. And here's how the poet signals it. As he starts to walk up the hill that's shoaled and laid, beyond the point, the slope begins to rise. There sprang up a leopard, trim and very swift. It was covered by a pelt of many spots. Everywhere I looked, the beast was there, blocking my way. So time and again, I was about to turn and go back down. A little later, that gaudy beast, wild in its spotted pelt, and then good hope gave way and fear returned when the figure of a lion loomed up before me. And he was coming straight toward me, it seemed, with head raised high and furious with hunger. The air around him seemed to fear his presence. So he's blocked by a leopard, and then he's blocked by this great lion. Next, and now a she-wolf came, that in her leanness seemed racked with every kind of greediness. This last beast brought my spirit down so low with fear that seized me at the sight of her. I lost all hope of going up the hill. It's a really important moment. Hey, I can get out of this problem. I know I'm lost, but hey, there's the sun and I know the way, and off I go. But he's blocked by the three beasts. The three beasts symbolizes, it seems, the three categories of sin that Dante's going to have to deal with. And he calls them the sins of incontinence, the sins of violence, and the sins of fraudulence. I'll come back to those. The sins of incontinence are those where the passions of the body get the better of the mind. The sins of violence, violence against others, violence against oneself. So murderers and rapists and suicides and so on. But the most serious sin, he calls the sins of fraudulence, because they're more spiritually refined. Think of the sins of incontinence when the body gets the better of the mind. It's like, well, I was overwhelmed by passions beyond me. But the sins of fraudulence, like treachery, like destroying the life of a friend, they require a spiritual refinement. And that's why Dante puts them as the most serious. These will correspond now. So the leopard, the lion, the she-wolf correspond to the three levels of hell as he moves through. But the important point is there's no running up the hill. There's going to be a very difficult journey where you've got to confront these sins. People that go through the 12-step process will talk about the need for a searching moral inventory, right? So when you've admitted your weakness, you've admitted, look, I can't control this addiction. I'm going to turn my life over to a higher power. Okay. But now a searching moral inventory is called for. And that's in some ways the whole of the Inferno, is Dante going down, down, down to look in a way, yes, at the sins of others, but ultimately at his own sins of incontinence and violence and fraudulence. Only then will we be able to make progress up the hill. Okay, I won't read all, it's gorgeous poetry, of course, but I wouldn't have time to read all of it. But at this moment of truth, Dante's lost, he's afraid. And again, I bet anyone listening to me beyond the age of about 35, you know what he's talking about. This is not like a trivial, I'm having a bad day. This is someone dealing with a crisis that often happens at midlife, as he says, a real existential crisis. From that very dark place, death could scarce be bitterer. He cries out for help. And his cry is heard by three heavenly women. namely Maria, Mary, the mother of God. Mary hears his cry and she calls out to Lucia. Now, Lucia is the patroness of sight because St. Lucy the martyr had her eyes gouged out. That was part of her martyrdom. And she's usually depicted holding her eyes on a platter. So she becomes the patroness of sight and vision. So Maria calls to Lucia, and then Lucia in heaven calls to Beatrice. Ah, that Beatrice, she's the one that Dante loves. Let's get her to help. And then Beatrice calls to Virgil, who's going to lead Dante. And I'll get to Virgil in a second. But I want you to see something here that's, I think, really interesting. Dante was, by all accounts, a kind of tough, macho guy. He was a politico in the rough and tumble of Florentine politics. He was a leader of this city. More to it, before he was exiled and wrote this poem, he was already known as a great poet and intellectual. There's a story told about him that he was going through Florence one day and there was a blacksmith working. And while he was working, he was singing one of Dante's verses. So they often set this to music. And so the man is singing, but he's getting it a little bit wrong. And so they say Dante went over to him and he grabbed whatever he was working on and he threw it against the wall. And the blacksmith, "What are you doing?" And Dante reportedly said, "You destroy my work, I destroy yours." So my point is, this is a tough guy. This is a tough, macho, kind of egotistical fellow. Who saves him? He's saved by 3 heavenly women. And I'll read the Jungian psychologist on this, but how often the man, especially this kind of tough macho guy, needs the refining influence of the feminine. And indeed, it's these 3 heavenly women who conspire to help him. So Maria to Lucia. By the way, James Joyce, who reverenced Dante, calls his daughter Lucia. She had a sad life, by the way, Lucia Joyce, but he named her in honor of Dante. So Maria calls Lucia, who calls Beatrice, who summons Virgil. Now let me just read you the section when Virgil emerges. Remember, he tries to get up the hill and he's blocked by the 3 beasts. While I was rushing down to that low place, so coming off the hill, my eyes made out a figure coming toward me, of one grown faint, perhaps from too much silence. When I saw him standing in this wasteland, "Have pity on my soul," I cried to him. "Whichever you are, shade or living man." Are you a ghost or a man? "No longer living man, though once I was," he said. "My parents were from Lombardy, both of them Mantuans by birth. I was born, though somewhat late, sub Julio, under the time of Julius Caesar, and lived in Rome when good Augustus reigned." So who is this? It's the great Roman epic poet Virgil, who's summoned out of limbo. He's summoned out of his supernatural state to come and help Dante. 3 women summon a man who is very much like Dante. So the point there that he's from Lombardy and so on, he's an Italian epic poet. How many of those are there? So someone very much like Dante is sent to be his guide. Now, it's something very interesting, everybody, in the spiritual life. You know the old saying that when the student is ready, the master comes. And there's a lot to that. In traditions, both East and West, both Christian and non-Christian, you find this idea. In the spiritual order, you need a guide. Someone that's been down this road before, that knows the pitfalls, knows the way. Remember Teresa of Avila when someone said, "Oh, I'm doing my own retreat. I'm my own retreat director." And she said, "Well, then the devil is your director." Because you can't do that in the spiritual order. Everybody needs a master of some kind. And so Virgil arrives to help Dante. Now, there'll be 3 guides. Again, no surprise, 3. Virgil guides Dante all the way down through hell and all the way up Mount Purgatory. But then he gives way to Beatrice. And Beatrice is going to guide him through the heavenly realm. But then when we get to the very height, we'll get there in a little bit, she gives way, and Saint Bernard becomes the final guide. From Virgil to Beatrice to Bernard. What do they stand for? Virgil stands for human reason. So he's a pre-Christian figure. He's not touched by biblical grace. He stands for all that's best in our philosophical and poetic traditions. Beatrice stands for theology, which goes beyond what reason can attain. But even theology gives way at the end to what? To mysticism. And that's what St. Bernard, one of the great mystical masters of the tradition, represents. Beautiful hierarchy from reason to faith to mysticism. That's the trio of guides that Dante will need throughout this journey. What's Virgil's message to him? Well, I got good news and bad news. The good news is there is a way out of this condition you're in. The bad news is we have to go to hell. So, Virgil's point, and I think any spiritual director worth his salt or her salt will say this. The only way up finally is down. Remember, searching moral inventory. In order to rise to where God wants me to be, I have to go down. All the way down within my own soul. And I've got to search out and see clearly. Remember, there's no sleeping here. Sleeping is not good as a spiritual category. I've got to see the dysfunction in me that's kept me from God, that's pushed me off the right road. And so Virgil is going to lead him down, down, down through the various levels of hell so that he might see. There's several moments in the Inferno when Dante is so overwhelmed by what he takes in, the suffering of the damned, that he faints like a Victorian, matron. He faints away. Virgil kicks him. Get up. There's no fainting here. You got to see what's going on. He has no sympathy for this kind of hyper emotionalized, oh, I can't bear it. No, get up and look at it. You're under the aegis of Santa Lucia, the patroness of sight and vision. And so Dante is forced to see all the way down till he comes, and we'll see in the next lecture, to the very source of his spiritual dysfunction.
Wow,
There we are.
That was quite good.
That was good.
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I may have mentioned that I had a sort of a Dante period about, I don't know, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago. It was before I retired. I was sort of, enthralled with reading the Divine Comedy. And I think I did get through it all the way to heaven. But I couldn't make head or tails out of it the way that he is beginning to explain it.
It reminds me of, I would just, as he was say, well, that's a theme that's very deep. He's really talking about, something obviously much deeper than just the story. Remember Louis Franz
Oh my God, yes.
taught us, Tim, I guess he was in college. You left,
Yeah.
you left after high school, but he taught us in college, and he taught, it was English literature, but he always saw stories as deeper than the story, something that I always remember. There was a poem, he had us read a poem by a guy named Delmore Schwartz called The Heavy Bear That Goes With Me. And he was obviously talking about our humanity, or whoever it was, but whoever he called upon to say, what was this story about for you? He says, well, it was a story about a bear. and and Franz was talking about it's so much deeper than a story about it. And so this is my first, I've had this book for years, and this friend of mine, a priest named Jim Fredericks, he's lives over in Sonoma. He's a San Francisco priest who taught at Loyola Marymount, taught theology, but he is wild about Dante and the way George talked about it, George Ferrick, and he thinks everybody should read Dante. And now I'm beginning to understand why, because it's about something much deeper than anything else. And so it's very interesting. I think Barron we all need a guide. He sounds like a pretty good guide to me.
Agreed, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so Gary, how was your dinner with all of this?
Oh,
bishops that
well,
are- yeah.
I'll say, so this dinner, just down the street from me are a couple, Terry and Kathy O'Sullivan. They're parishioners here at St. Vincent's, and her brother is John Wester. Now, John Wester is a San Francisco priest who became a bishop. He went to Salt Lake City. In fact, our classmate Chuck Cummins, I don't know if who of you remember Chuck Cummins?
Oh, yeah.
He was our
Big
class,
time.
he was ordained for the Diocese of Salt Lake City, and so Chuck is here. And then now John is currently the Archbishop of Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Good post.
The other person is other two people are Bill Justice and Randy Calvo. They are San Francisco priests who also became bishops. Randy became the Bishop of Reno, and he just retired about a month ago. And Bill was an auxiliary in San Francisco, and he retired about a month ago. Now, Bill and Randy live over in Sonoma. Randy goes back and forth between Reno and Sonoma. Anyway, it was John Wester's birthday, and I had dinner over at Terry and Kathy's with John about a couple of months ago. He wanted to get together again, so we had a good dinner. And let me just say, these three bishops would be on the more, the American Catholic bishops are just as divided as the country is, and they are divided in exactly the same way. That's my feeling. They're those who would be considered, conservative, if you want to put it that way, or traditionalist, or however you want to describe them, on the right-hand side would also be politically on the right.
Mhm.
And those who are on the left are politically on the left. And they are just as we are. I mean, they can speak all they want. It doesn't make any difference. So, they were very much against. Now, neither Randy nor Bill were going to go to the meeting that they just had. John was going to it, but Randy's retired. He's happy. John said, "If you guys go, you ought to have your head examined." Because I think, and I was reading somewhere where this Massimo Fagioli, he's a
Yeah.
commentator. He's an Italian. Is he a
Theologian.
theologian? And I think historian. I'm not.
Calls himself, historical theologian.
Yeah, he says apparently. Well, the guy that I read every week, or a couple, is this Michael Sean Winters. He's writes
Yeah.
with the NCR. I'm dying to read what he had to say. He says the shepherds are lost. That's his title of his commentary this morning. That he said, I think he quoted Fagioli as saying most of the more liberal bishops are beginning to stay away from going to these meetings. So they're just Tim, it would be the same kind of discussion among them that we would all be having among ourselves. I mean, those of us who think the way we think, which would be a more Vatican II style of thinking, it would be the exact same way. They were all against the idea of this document that would address Biden, not being able to receive, Holy Communion. They thought that was disastrous. And as does P.J. McGrath, who's a San Francisco priest who became the bishop of San Jose. He's a good friend, and they just feel that these cultural warriors, they want to use the Eucharist as a weapon, basically, or that's what they call it, weaponizing the Eucharist. And you know, they would, and I don't know what they finally decided. I was talking to a seminarian from our parish, came over for dinner last night, and he comes to talk to me so he can keep his balance, because he's in the heart of what I call Basha land. Basha is our bishop, and he's one of these culture warrior bishops. And his cathedral is kind of, it's like a little pre-Vatican II bubble, you know, an anti-Vatican II bubble. And Chris is there for his pastoral year. He comes to have dinner with me. In fact, he's going to join some other priest friends and myself tonight for dinner, so he can kind of just keep balance. I mean, he loves the Latin Mass, for example, and all that sort of stuff. But he's got kind of that. He sort of stands apart from it. He's not an ideologue, you know. But but he. I think I don't know what they voted on, but I told him, I simply said, nobody's going to read this document anyway. I mean, I don't know who reads these documents, but if they did something like this about Biden, that's all that would come out. You know, that's all that would come out. But Tim, our dinner the other night was great. We all said Mass together first, and then we just had our conversation. But their conversation, they could all join us here, and they'd just be part of this group, and that's how they would be. They don't have any extra power or influence. I mean, I think the conference is pretty well divided. I mean, and you've got some guys who are, they're real culture warriors. I don't know how else to say it.
Is there a spectrum of thinking, Gary, among these guys?
I'm sorry?
Is there a spectrum of thinking? You know, some guy leans a little to the left and some guy leans a little to the right, or far right, far left, whatever.
No, they would be the three of them would be moderates. I mean, moderately left. I mean, they would say that Biden's stance on abortion is troubling. I mean, and it is troubling. I don't know how.
That's mildly put.
Mild, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, apparently, I don't follow this too closely. I think it's one thing for Biden simply to say, I have to support whatever the law is. I don't know how what they expect him to do, but apparently he's working at the Republic, whoever they are under his administration, are working to do something against the Hyde Amendment. I think, what is the Hyde Amendment? Does that prohibit public funds for abortion? I forget exactly.
Yes, that's what it is.
That's taking a step beyond. I mean, that's a more active step. So it is disturbing to them.
Oh, he's taken much more steps with respect to abortion than that.
I'm not familiar. All I know is I know they have, obviously Biden's position is troubling. They just don't think that he should be denied Holy Communion because of it. I guess that would be.
I agree with that myself.
That would be the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
So Ned, I have to ask you, Ned, why do you agree with that?
I'm sorry, Tim?
Why do you agree that he should not be denied communion? I mean, this troubles me because he has become quite assertive in promoting the access to abortion for women. And,
absolutely. And I just cannot believe that the man ran as a moderate, and the closer he got to the election, he swung very, very far to the left. And I couldn't understand how he had picked
Kamala Harris.
How that made no sense to me except politically. And so I'm now trying to understand how this guy lives in his own skin, being what he says is a practicing, present Catholic with a Catholic mind, and is doing all this stuff about abortion. Now, I don't think abortion is the only issue that we, there are folk like my son who are so concentrated on how powers treat the issue of abortion that it's hard for him to see anything else. But
Hard for him, he doesn't.
yeah, but Biden has taken it, I am disgusted with him about that.
But Ned, but by the same token, I mean, and this, again, I just read this Michael Sean Winters. That's why I would be interested in finding a balance, something to read that would be thoughtful on the other side. When you mentioned this Sullivan, I thought maybe that, because, George Farrick talked about this Heather Cox Richardson. I've started to read her. She sees a wonderful commentary every day politically, and she's obviously, but it's very thoughtful, and it is biased. She's a Democrat, obviously, but it would be nice to read something that's on the other side, but just as thoughtful and not some sort of diatribe. But this Michael Sean Winters said that the bishops should be excited about this. I guess the House passed this social legislation last night. They passed Build Back Better business, because he said that's everything that Catholic social teaching has been pushing.
It's much of
everything. And so you've got, this is the conundrum when you're dealing with politics in a pluralistic society. I was talking to Bill Justice. They had the last Ad Limina visit. That's where all the bishops of a region go to Rome. They do this every 5 years, and they meet with all the various, what they call them, dicasteries, the congregations in the Vatican, and they meet with the Pope. In fact, Bill said they spent 3 hours with Francis, and it was the most marvelous experience because they had a dialogue. But in one of the things, Cordileone, who's from San Francisco, this is one of the guys, one of the culture warriors, and is pushing all this, talked about this whole thing. And whoever it was, whatever congregation it was, the response was, no, you should not do this, because he said, you only have 2 political parties in your country, and you will be seen as partisan. He said, and maybe in Europe, you've got 14 different, whatever you've got. In some of these countries, you've got so many different kinds of political parties. You don't necessarily identify with one, but in this particular case, you'd identify with only one particular party. And that's the problem, but that's the conundrum. You've got Biden, who is obviously, as you say, going beyond the beyond in terms of abortion. But the other part of his agenda is very Catholic. So what do you do? So do you deny him communion because of the abortion thing? And that's what the bishops would say. Those guys would say, no, abortion is the preeminent. That's it. That's it. Now, Francis has said that is, you can't just, Pope Francis does not agree with that.
Part of the problem.
It's part of a panoply of it.
Part
I
of the
have to
problem.
take this call. I'll be gone for a while.
Part of the problem is that
Nancy,
the
how are you?
George, we can hear you.
Tell George to mute
I'm
his.
fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
George,
Maybe I can mute him.
There you go.
There we
got-
go. Okay.
you've
George,
got
you
the
muted?
power. You've got the power.
I have the power.
Well done, leader. Well done.
We knew we could
But-
trust
but,
you.
one of the parts of the problem is that the Democratic Party is yielding to its most
Yeah.
radical segment.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it
And
just
our
dawned on me,
bishop-
I wonder if Biden is buying into the radical part, the ultra progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which actually in some ways sees abortion also as the litmus test. Any restriction on
On the
abortion
other side, yeah,
on
exactly.
the other side. But, he needs also to get their vote on
Yeah.
his more moderate
The other
social programs.
That's it.
So, you
Good.
know, Biden himself is between a rock and a hard place. If he had a softer stand on abortion and tried to bring people together to talk more about it and get some kind of a compromise deal on what a policy for abortion should be, he'd never be elected president.
That's right.
And then he couldn't get the other part of his agenda through.
Exactly.
And that,
Exactly.
you know, Cordileone, it was interviewed in America Magazine. They interviewed him, and he said it looks like Biden is getting his position more from his Democratic party than from his faith. That's what they would say, and it's, you know,
There's some truth in that.
there's a truth to that. I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's just what do you do? How do you? I mean, it's a conundrum.
Well,
I
part
think-
of it is how hyperpolarized everything else is around. You either have to be on one side or you're on the other.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to navigate a centrist sort of position and survive within that polarized atmosphere.
Isn't it amazing? All Trump talked about was infrastructure when he was president, never got it through.
Yeah.
And that was always the bipartisan issue that they could all do together. And now when they finally get it through, Trump, of course, you know, vilifies them for getting something done. And the House, those guys in McCarthy are going to strip the 13 Republican people who voted for the infrastructure thing of their committees on an issue that at one time was considered bipartisan. I mean, it just,
It was, yeah.
You know what Congress did in the old days? This is before Newt Gingrich. And I think Newt Gingrich, when he was, Speaker of the House?
Yep.
He put an end to this. But, you know, in the old days, Congress did their work during the day for the most part. And then at night, the bipartisan thing was they went out and drank and caroused together.
yes.
And bartered and
Yeah, and it was
compromised and-
it was at those drinking parties that they actually hammered out the compromise, the compromise policies.
Yep.
And I think it was, at least I read an article that one of the things that Gingrich put an end to that and said, you know, when you are your time off, you should not be in Washington, go back into your district. Well, listen to what your people are saying. Well, of course, what they did was go back into their district and listen to the most radical sides of their own party. But I think, you know, they should reinstitute a party in the sense of going out and getting drunk and carousing. That would probably do an awful lot of good in helping them to achieve a compromise. You know, when people who get drunk together, you know, have a very difficult time fighting with one another later on, or at least
Is this from your experience?
not, yeah, that's right. Of course. I didn't quite put that right, but I do think that,
There needs to be a lot of food involved, not just drink.
right, there needs to be food, there needs to be dining together, you know, Jesus said something about, you know, had something good to say about that in the Eucharist.
Well, the humanity of each of the participants in these soirees, if you want to call them that, would let their guards down and at least to some extent listen to the other guy,
Yeah,
and to some extent speak truthfully about their own feelings to them. And so it would be hard to get so hard. People stay in their bubbles and they will not cross those bubbles. And so they're just talking to themselves, hardening themselves even more. It's absolutely nuts. And I think I agree. Biden is between a rock and a hard place. And if he doesn't have AOC's group, he's going to have a hard time passing moderate stuff.
Mhm.
You know, and if he doesn't have some of the centrists, et cetera, it's just nuts. I think Trump used that mechanism or that practice when he decided that he was going to oppose abortion. And he did it even into the little nooks and crannies of funding abortion internationally through many agencies, et cetera, et cetera. So the hard right anti-abortion folk loved him.
Yeah. And they had a strong talking point to the not so hard right people who also opposed abortion. So
Mm.
pulled him on their side. And, you know, God knows how many abortions Trump may have paid for in his, that's obviously speculation, and people would slap my hand for saying that, but
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, I could not understand how he got over or how people could overlook. You know, that shouldn't probably be determinative because, you know, you look at Bill Clinton and others, John Kennedy, but that tape that was released before the election. Remember coming out of that,
If that didn't undo him, nothing will. So
oh God, help us.
but, you know, in some ways you could say, I think the same kind of cynicism, if you will, or spirit of compromise gripped Trump as grips Biden, that their respective positions on abortion are playing to get votes.
Yeah.
And to lure votes away from the other side.
I believe that. I believe that. And Tim, to your question about why would I oppose why would I oppose refusing him communion? I don't think Jesus is a tool. I don't think Jesus is a weapon. I don't think Jesus is anything but the compassionate, loving God that he is, who said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood. And to the extent that Biden or anyone like him has got a scintilla or more of genuine faith, at some point in his life in chewing the body of Christ, we get into the presence of God in the Eucharist thing, but let's not. To the extent of eating that flesh and drinking that blood, I maybe this is too concrete, but I believe that Jesus becomes part of our own, not only our own thinking and spirituality, but part of our body.
we become part of him. You
Yes,
are
absolutely, and we him.
you are what you eat.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so I cannot say that I'm going to be so judgmental about this guy that I'm going to say you can't have Jesus.
No.
Not you. Not you. I have decided that you are not worthy of Jesus. And I can't do that.
No, and that's
As much as I think he's really screwing it.
you don't know what's inside of his relationship with the Lord, and that's the judgment that they make.
Yeah, so that's what I'm that's my thinking, Tim, and however right or wrong or that's the best I can do.
Let me ask you this. It seems to me, and I don't have the spiritual sophistication, the religious training that you guys have. So let me just take it from a layman now for over 60 years. I think if I went to my parish and talked to 10 good friends and said, what do you think is really behind the condemnation of abortion? I think I would find, and I'll use college graduates. I think I would find uncertainty on the part of practicing Catholics as to what is the basis of the church's teaching. I think I would, I mean, if the majority of Catholics don't believe in the real presence in the Eucharist, as we're finding out, I don't think that many Catholics, okay, I don't think many of my friends could tell me how the church arrived at its conclusion, its doctrine about abortion. And so I'm thinking, okay, has the church, and I don't know who I mean by the church, has the church well educated in a good manner? Have we educated our members about how did we get here? How did we get here? You know, and one of my friends said to me, you know, the idea, the belief that that through Christ, the priest changes bread and wine into the real body and blood of Christ, they can look to John's gospel, you know, and the number of beautiful examples in the New Testament where Jesus could have said, well, I didn't really mean it this way. And so I think there's a lot of scriptural basis for our belief in the Eucharist. But when you get to this question of when does life begin, or when is this thing in a woman's womb a human being, I think a lot of people say, well, prove it. And I'm not trying to simplify it, but I think that given that abortion has become a polarizing issue, where is the hierarchy? Where is my bishop? Where is the teaching authority of the church leading people to really understand it? I mean, that's, and so I think that doesn't a great number of Catholics support abortion at some stages of fetal development? I mean, I think they do. I don't know.
Talking like first trimester.
Or something, you know, first day or two kind of thing. And so I wish that the church would speak in layman's terms to this issue. I wish they would. And,
Haven't they done that? I mean, it seems to me.
well, okay, I've never heard it from the altar. I've never once heard a conversation or a homily about it. Never in my whole life have I ever heard one.
And some people on the right claim that the Pope talks too little about it and doesn't make proclamations often enough about that. I'm not sure that's right. That's true.
Well, I mean, I've had people tell me about their parish that that's all they ever hear about.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's all they ever hear
I've
about.
never heard that.
Oh, yes. There are a lot who complain that way too. You know, you go to Father Altman's parish back in, where is it?
Yeah.
You know, or
Oh, and yeah,
or a
the
couple
guy.
of others around in our archdiocese. And you know, I've had people come, you know, how refreshing it is to actually come to a parish where the homilies are about Jesus Christ rather than about blasting people who
Oh,
get abortion.
oh, okay.
That's what the homily is supposed to be. It's a part of the liturgy, and the whole idea of the homily is how are these scriptures? How do they come alive in your life this week?
Perfect. Yeah. It's not meant to be a
That's-
catechesis, is it? It's not
One
a
of the
catechesis.
reasons that every day I read the scriptures of the day. I read 2 or 3, including Barron, reflecting on the scriptures, which I think both Tom and Gary have in your heart, that the daily scripture is what is linked to the Eucharist every time. So I'm guessing if you have mass at the table, you also have the scripture of the day.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's a both and, which brings me to two terms. One, the press. Two, polarized. And maybe three, militancy. The
Mhm.
press have incredible power right now, it seems to me. And I know a lot of folks who just read the press that supports their left or just supports their right. And so the press is a big part of this. And that's a challenge for Pope Francis, I think.
Well, it's a challenge for all of us, I think. Have you, in my youth, I used to think that William Buckley was just way too far right. And now I'm thinking that the publication that he founded is a much more balanced publication than I realized.
The New Republic.
Yeah, I read.
No, his was National Review, I think.
National Review.
National Review, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
The
National
Republic is on the other side.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I think Commonweal and the National Catholic Reporter more than anything is left. And then there are others that are more far left, but I don't get that. I don't get past National Catholic Reporter. Commonweal is also, I think, a balanced left of center.
Isn't that a Jesuit thing? Is that
No.
Jesuit? Or- That's America.
America, I think, is left of center.
Yeah.
And then National Review, I think, is quite good as a center right publication. So I think they try to be accurate. And I think this Andrew Sullivan guy, I really think he is good.
Ned, would you forward me one of his things so I could maybe launch onto his
Sure.
letter?
Sure. He's a proud gay guy who knows God loves him and is confident that he doesn't have to apologize to anybody about. George believes, and I think he's right, Crook, that he is the trigger point that got the nation to realize and approve of, and therefore get decisions out of the Supreme Court about the rights of gay people, marriage, etc.
But does he do political commentary?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That's what I'd like to read. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll send you the stuff. I think Tom's the one that knows all about all these guys.
Yeah, Andrew Sullivan, I haven't followed. I think I probably will. The other publication that I was very, very impressed with, and I'm a little less so now, is the American Conservative.
Hmm.
And that has since been kind of taken over by people a little farther on the right. George, welcome back, and you need to unmute yourself. I muted you because we were eavesdropping on your conversation.
You were going on about Nancy.
Yeah, well, I was getting out of the room, so you guys couldn't hear me, but
George,
We heard you all the way to the backyard.
yeah.
okay.
While you were gone, we solved the whole issue.
Right.
Well,
I'll be
I'm glad because it needs solving.
No,
Gary, look, there's a question it was on the tip of my tongue, and then I was pulled away. But this guy Randy, your friend, was an auxiliary to Cordileone. You said
no. Randy was Bill Justice would be the auxiliary of San Francisco, and then Cordileone came in, and Bill and Sal. Bill said one day Sal Corleone was saying something about Bill is one of my very close friends, and Bill said, "Really? I wonder where he got that idea." Because no, Bill did not agree. Bill, I mean, he had to work together, but no, their philosophies, their theologies are far apart.
Well, what is he like as a person? I mean, was he able to be cordial back and forth with
That would be cordial.
Yeah, because he seems so. That's the impression I'm getting.
Corleone,
Yeah,
yeah, he did cordial. Even in this interview in America Magazine, he was saying that at least Nancy Pelosi, you know, he has this thing, a rosary. Was it you get a rose if you say the rosary for Nancy Pelosi, asking God to help change her mind or whatever the heck it is. But he's in this article, he felt that she has always been respectful when
yeah, I read it.
when they've talked. Yeah.
He's not just asking for rosaries for her. He's asking people to fast for her.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, it was funny as we were talking. I know the Rome said, this is a year or two ago, to the bishops of our country, you know, to engage these politicians in dialogue. And why wouldn't the Conference of Catholic Bishops arrange some kind of a meeting or some sort of a way where they could sit down with Biden and talk?
You know,
What are constructive ways what are different ways that what we believe in could be somehow integrated into, you know, into
my
the
brother-in-law
of our country.
told me, yeah, but Betty's brother told us a story about that.
Who is he, George? Who is your brother?
He's a retired bishop of San Bernardino, Riverside.
Okay.
And
Name
he
it
was-
Jerry Barnes.
yeah, he was chairman of the immigration committee for a while, and very well thought of as a bishop. And he told some stories about he was back there, you know, and the problem was that the other bishops he was involved with in a couple of meetings, Archbishop Naumann of Kansas
Oh.
City,
Yeah.
and I forget the other guy, but they were meeting with Teddy Kennedy, and Naumann started up on Teddy Kennedy, and Teddy Kennedy said, "I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to listen to you to listen to this. I'm leaving. Bye," and walked out on him.
Mhm.
And my brother-in-law thinks that was, he did not fault Kennedy for it. He faulted Naumann. He said he was arrogant and bossy. And they also met with Kerry, and I don't remember what happened there, but it wasn't a success, you know. I don't think, but I don't think dialogue would change Biden. I think he's just sort of poured out. You know, he's going to follow the weight of opinion in the Democratic Party and not his Catholic, so-called Catholic conscience. You know, I mean, Biden, as Cordileone points out in that article, Biden used to say, well, I'm a Catholic, I accept the church's teaching on abortion. But I still think I can oppose it on those that disagree with me. Okay. Now, most recently, he said, I've changed my mind. I don't think life begins at conception. Well, it's kind of hard to say you follow the church's teaching then.
George, did he really say that? That's what Cordileone said he said.
That's what I wonder.
Did he really say that?
I think so.
think
I
he did,
remember when he said it. I don't remember where I read it, but it wasn't in, you know, LifeSite News or something.
It
Well,
was.
we know that if it's on the internet, it's true. So
It
we
was
have to consider that.
Definitionally.
That doesn't make it true.
George, did you say it was in LifeSite?
No, I don't read
Okay.
that.
Well, you know, I mean,
Please.
I remember.
Could I interrupt for just a second? Forgive me for doing this. This morning at 6:30, I received a call from my primary care physician saying that I had to not eat anything and drink very much to the extent I could, because I had to take a CT
Oh,
test with some kind of ink or
Oh.
some kind of a marker, because I have a couple of what were small aneurysms in my iliac arteries.
Hmm.
And he said that they'd doubled in size, and he wants to be
man.
sure and all that stuff. So I'd ask for your prayers. I know we all need prayers, and we all pray for one another. I would ask that you guys help me out there on this particular thing, and it's not.
When is your scan?
Yeah,
Uh,
when is it?
I've got to be there in 20 minutes.
You better go.
And it's very close. So thank you, guys.
Wait, it's very close. Where are you going?
I'm going just to the radiology department, George. Don't
The
get excited.
radiology department where?
At St. Jude's.
Oh, Dad.
Relax. It's okay. I've talked with Dan about it. Dan's my son, a doctor who saved my life literally from some malpractice that was committed when I had a very minor operation to repair some hernias in my stomach. And from that point forward, Dan says, don't you ever go in there. But we've talked about this, and this is just a procedure to find out what's there. So anyway,
Hey, Ned, didn't you have a hernia in high school?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Okay,
Mm.
this may be a figment. I remember it was junior, senior year, and you came back, and the story that you told was this very attractive nurse that had to shave your pubic region.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think you got a hard on. Yeah, I think
Among
that.
other things.
Yeah, yeah.
No, she was something else. But anyway, please pray for me. If
The
you-
memories I have are amazing.
they are.
that you really
Ned,
We
Ned.
will. Good
God
luck.
bless.
do, you guys.
Ned,
Yes.
I exchanged emails with Dr. Chavira last night asking of how much concern is this?
Yes.
And his answer was minor.
That's what he told me. Yes.
Yeah, so that's good
and-
news.
And part of the reason for going to St. Jude's to get this thing and not worry about their
Right.
Their attempts to murder you in the past.
I'll have to tell you guys about that later. Okay.
Yeah, there've been 2 of them, gentlemen.
God bless, Ned. God bless.
Thank you. God bless.
So what did his son say to you, George?
He said it was of minor concern.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just, cryptic texts or emails.
Are you friendly with this son?
Oh, yeah, very.
Oh, you are.
Yeah. The other son probably doesn't like me as much as the doctor's son. The
Mhm.
son that's a pro-life fanatic. He's one of these, abortion is the only moral issue that matters, guys.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I'm glad to hear Corleone is a affable fellow. That's
I actually met him years ago. I was when we were in Rome for our sabbatical. We were at the North American College, and this friend of mine, I told you, Harry Gregg from Lake Charles, had been for 3 years. Before that, had worked in Rome, and Ratzinger was his boss. He was at that Congregation for the Doctrine on the Faith, and he lived at the Villa Stritch, which is a residence for a priest working in the Vatican, American priest working in the Vatican. And one day, Harry and I went over there for lunch with the mention of the priest. And Corleone was at the time working in the Vatican. He was not yet a bishop, and a pleasant fellow. And then I remember seeing him when we were on retreat in Menlo Park. He came for some reason or other to see someone, we were, our diocesan, my diocese is Santa Rosa. And we have our retreats at Vallombrosa Retreat House in Menlo Park. And Corleone had come to see someone there. And I happened to be walking by and he recognized me and said hello. I forget exactly. I don't know if they remember my name because we only met kind of briefly, but he was very pleasant. You know, and he's a pleasant man.
I have a story to tell. The second Napa Institute, where we had a wine and cigar session. And he stood up and raised on maybe 10 minutes, $65,000 for a project he had. He was an amazing charmer. And I'll always remember that. And George, I think you're chuckling because he also said that pontifical mass that lasted 2 hours.
Yeah,
and
you told me about that, John.
Took all those like 27 minutes just to vest him with all these lackeys around. So there's a both and in Corleone, I think.
This is not the guy, the mafia guy in The Godfather.
Oh,
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with this guy. He seems like a West Coast guy.
Archbishop of San Francisco, right?
Okay, okay, all right.
Supposedly his predecessor was Levada. Is that right, Gary?
no, his predecessor was George Niederauer.
Oh,
Levada came first, and then Niederauer, and then Corleone.
I had heard a story, but I thought it was
There was
Levada.
John Raphael Quinn, of course, first, and then
Yeah,
Levada, and Levada actually was administrator of our diocese when Pat Zeman took us under. Then Levada was our administrator, and then I think George Niederauer came after Levada, and then Corleone replaced George Niederauer.
well, I thought it was Levada, but the story I heard was the predecessor was in surgery and in the hospital and not really, compos mentis at the moment. And that's when they appointed Corleone without input from, I thought it was Levada. Well, wait a minute, Levada went from San Francisco to Rome, right?
Yeah.
Taking Ratzinger's old job.
Yeah.
So maybe it was Levada, but
Levada
supposedly he was pissed.
Levada was on the congregation of bishops, so he was one of the people responsible in the congregation for choosing bishops of different dioceses. And the story that we heard in our diocese was that Raymond Burke, was also on the congregation, and Burke for the longest time wanted to rein in the West Coast, what they considered to be a very, far left part of the church. And he exercised his influence, but according to someone, wherever I heard this from my friend Dan Welton, who has bishop friends also, but that Levada was on a trip to India somewhere when the decision was made to send the guy that we have now, Vasha, to Santa Rosa. And he's a very conservative, and he's one of those cultural warrior kind of bishops. And then I think Burke probably had the same kind of influence to get Corleone to San Francisco. I don't know. Then they put a Jesuit named Barber, nice fellow apparently, but again, a very culturally, religiously, what do you want to call him, on the right wing in Oakland. So you've got at least 3 dioceses where in this area where the bishops are on that right end. And that may have happened too with Corleone. I don't know that, George. I know about our bishop. So.
Well, go figure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fortunate Francis came in when he came in, because the right wing of the American episcopacy would be, oh, can you imagine how much stronger it would be had Francis not become Pope in 2013?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
They're strong enough as they are.
Yeah. But time's against them if Francis lives another, stays in office another 4 or 5 years,
Yeah.
supposedly. You know, their 75th birth, many of them are going to turn 75 in that period. Guy I just get such a, is this guy in Tyler, Texas, Strickland.
Oh, yeah, he's Bill Justice says that guy's like a Baptist minister who got ordained in Tyler, Texas. That's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, where do these guys come from? But I don't understand the conservative mindset that much. I mean, I understand Edmund Burke style conservatism, you know, the National Review kind of conservatism. But I kind of like it. I mean, it probably defines where I am more than anything else does now. But some of these people, I mean, you know, like Hawks and McIntyre, you know, you had to get permission to say the office in English. Why? Why did they care?
Well, that of course was a Vatican rule.
Well, okay.
And it was a time of transition. It didn't last very long. And but you know, the Vatican pretty much did have to felt that it had to maintain a tight hand in the liturgical reforms, a firm hand. And I think that may have kind of backfired on them because it was so difficult to get some things through, and everything that got through was mandated, and people were saying, you know, wait a minute, where is legitimate freedom here? So
Can I ask you two priests a question? It came up last month in the neighboring. Okay, first of all, our bishop, his name is Jugis, Jugis, and actually he was born and raised in this part of North Carolina, was ordained for this diocese, and was a parish priest down the road, down the mountain. Anyway, he has a policy that religious exemptions for the vaccine will not be given, not be authorized. Okay, so neighboring parish, we've got this young Nazi who's now the pastor down there. And so he is telling his parish, you come to me, you bring me the form for the, I don't know what it's called, but there's a religious exemption. I will sign it. I will sign it. And so, and he's very public about it. And he posts his homilies online, so all for the world to see. So how does it work in a diocese where a priest would publicly go against bishops, whatever you call it? I don't know if it's bishop's orders or directive. I don't know what you guys call it. Is that a serious thing, or are bishops pretty much kind of got enough on their plate that they're not going to deal with that kind of shit? I mean, it just kind of stunned me when I heard about it, because the guy is, and this is a guy, and I was telling Crook this. So before the election, this parish priest told his congregation that it would be a mortal sin if they voted for Biden. That a Catholic absolutely could not vote for Biden because of the stand on abortion. And there's a group of priests in this part of the country who they've almost taken their message from the Republican Party platform. And printed it in a lot of parish bulletins, this is before the election, that it would be immoral for a Catholic to vote for Biden. And they kind of did it just kind of in the face of the bishop, because the bishop has been urging, you know, don't do it. But these guys have just gone ahead and done it.
Mhm.
What happens when that happens? Tom and Gary, what happens?
Apparently what happens is not much. I think the bishop kind of has to say, well, at what cost am I going to discipline this guy? The bishop of Altman's diocese, I forget the diocese.
Like the Altman case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, Altman continued, no matter what he did, Altman continued to defy him and found another bishop that supposedly more or less took him on. Or, I don't remember all the details of that, but, to what extent do you as a bishop want to, what hill do you want to die on?
Exactly.
What hill is important enough for you to die on? Because you know that whatever you do about this person personally, to remove him, it's going to cause a stink that you may not actually survive, but it's going to be draining, it's going to be time consuming, it's going to take away from the legitimate stuff that you should be doing. I think there's a big part of that that's immobilizing bishops.
What do you think, Gary?
Well, exactly what Tom is saying. I mean, I would have said he just has to decide which, where does he want to take a stand? I mean, which is the battle that you want to have, and so that bishop in La Crosse, who finally did remove this guy. I mean, the guy is still talking. I don't know what, but so I don't know that it's really up to the bishop. The bishop has the right. He could very easily call the guy in and say, "I'm removing you as pastor, because and you no longer have faculties in this diocese." If you want,
I think he did.
I think
the
he
guy
did
in
too, George.
Wisconsin.
I don't know what the bishop is. I don't know canon law. Listen, I'll tell you what, these bishops know canon law, because this guy Altman or whoever
He was going to sue. He could get
a canon lawyer and bring it to Rome and all that sort of stuff. That could happen. I mean, yeah, there are laws that you have to deal with. My only point is the bishop could do whatever he really wanted to do. He could publicly say, Father so and so, is contrary, he could make a public statement if he wanted to say Father so and so is giving advice to his parish that is contrary to the advice that I as bishop want in my diocese, and he is being irresponsible, and he's harming the health of his parishioners. I mean, whatever, he could do that. I that bishop has just chosen that this is not.
Then there would be a big media storm about that, and you don't win those kinds of things.
And then there's this other demographic reality, is there's not enough priests to man the parishes.
Yeah.
And so if you had like this huge, like a football team, if you had 85 people on the sideline and you say, okay, Crook, you go in for Almy, they don't have that. There will be no priest that could take over, sadly.
That's true too.
So you're kind of stuck.
The problem with all this, it's so political, Tim. That's the thing. It's almost noon. I have to get some breakfast eventually, but it's that's why I said the church is divided, just the way the country is.
Yeah.
Seems to me.
Clear?
And it's
So let's wish each other a happy Thanksgiving. I'm not going to be able to be on next Friday.
Neither will I.
Okay.
okay. Should we do it next Friday? I
Why
haven't
don't you
heard.
take a poll?
Yeah. Well, let's take a poll by well, how do we feel of this group? Does anybody here want to do it next Friday? I can do it. I'm fine with it. But you're okay?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
I will not be late.
Gary can't. George is pondering.
I'm gonna abstain.
So is that a maybe that you will join if we do it?
Oh, if we do it, I'll be here, sure. But
Okay.
I just I don't especially want to go forward without two of our guys, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be a third. I mean, I don't know what Ned's position will be.
We don't know Ned, we don't know George Farrick, and the one I'm kind of hopeful for is Fred Lawrence.
Yeah, on the other hand, Fred
I'd
might
like to
not be
wonder-
teaching that.
It'd be
day.
wonderful if he were part of it. I'd love to.
And the fact that it's going to be recorded then engages those who don't attend.
The one thing
That's
I don't want to miss is the Baron, is that Baron, that next session of Baron.
Yeah.
That'll be recorded too.
It's just that I will not be around here and I have an iPad and I don't think I don't think it can do Zoom, to be honest with you. I tried it
Yeah.
once.
Well, that's what I'm on at the moment, Gary. is
Yeah.
an iPad.
Okay.
You know, what,
Send the link and I'll see. I don't know, but it's the Wednesday after. I'm Southern California with my family.
Oh,
yeah.
Next Tuesday to the following Tuesday. So
Well, does anybody in your family have like a fourth grader, fifth grader? You know, they could probably show you anything.
You're right, Tom.
no,
you're
we don't
so
have
right.
any of those.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
But Fred
Tom, can I ask you a
Lawrence, it
question?
would be great to hear Fred Lawrence, because Tim, I was telling you, Fred is a theologian, so it'd be wonderful to hear a theologian's way of reflecting on things,
Absolutely.
I-
Yes.
It would be a wonderful experience because I know when Jim
Yeah.
Fredericks gets going, it sometimes they think of things, they have an insight that we don't have, and it's wonderful that's what Fred would be. I always look forward to his commentary. I don't understand a lot of it, but I mean, that's because they have to speak in
Yeah.
terms of abstract, things.
I didn't see a commentary from last week. Did he do one?
I
oh,
did not.
no, I didn't receive one,
Okay.
but we'll see what happens. I'll,
Be
you know,
be fun to have him, though. That would be great.
Tom, what were you able to make any headway hunting down Father Bracken?
no, I wasn't. And at his age, I think I have just given up.
Who's that?
Joe Bracken.
I don't know who that is.
Maybe Joe Bracken, he's a Jesuit. He's in his 90s.
Oh.
He is one of the very, very few very faithful Catholic process theologians. He's written fairly extensively on the Trinity, but he applies process thinking, process philosophy into theology, Catholic theology. And he is still, I think, somewhat active. Maybe I'll try again to contact where I think he may be living. It's a retirement facility.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, on their website, he was there.
Yeah.
And for
Yeah.
well, for all we know, he has bad Alzheimer's.
The reason why for the reason why he even came up was when I was in Claremont at Our Lady of Assumption. He had, I think during my time, he had 2 extended stays there. Claremont Colleges was one of the centers for process theology, and he was teaching there, I think, and doing some research and working with some of the other process theologians who were there. And a very, very nice guy, very pleasant fellow. But he could be interesting and engaging as a theologian also, I think.
Yeah, well, I only met him once, but I was so impressed.
Uh-huh. Where did you meet him?
He was having dinner down at the Jesuit residence at Loyola.
Oh, okay.
and I was down there having dinner with Herbert, and Herbert said, George, let me introduce you to somebody, you know.
Mhm.
And he introduced me to him as this is the leading expert on the Trinity in the Roman Catholic Church.
Really?
Yeah,
That got
I
your
thought that-
attention.
Thought that was a credential,
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
yeah.
And he was such a nice, humble man.
What
He
is
was
his last name is what?
Bracken.
Bracken.
Bracken. Joseph Bracken. And he was at,
George.
where was he at?
Was he at seminary with you guys?
Oh, no. No, he
Oh,
was-
Jesuit.
no,
pardon me? I want to say Marquette, but I'm not sure.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I looked him up. He's 91, Tim, or thereabouts.
Oh, a young guy.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
But everybody, if he's still compos mentis, everybody would really enjoy him.
okay, I will renew my attempts.
Good for you. George, you triggered a thought that's been in my mind for the last half hour. And that is, you mentioned what a virtue of humility that he has. And so many of those who have gone to the extremes have an ego beyond what I think the Holy Spirit and dear Jesus would wish for priests and bishops. And to me, the humility is a Christ-like virtue that I try to pay attention to. And so many of those extremists are on ego trips, in my opinion.
Well,
Are
amen.
you talking about among the bishops?
Oh, priests, bishops, talk about this guy that's denying his bishop's instruction and speaking politics.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's egocentric to the nth degree.
Seems to me.
Yeah,
Um,
but his followers call him courageous.
His followers, what?
Called him courageous,
Yes.
and that everybody else is weak.
Milk toast. Milk toast.
Wasn't that an interesting piece that ended with milk toast?
yes, it was.
They're assholes.
Michelle Malkin, I think it is.
Yeah. And then Voorhees, God, he's just repulsive.
Well, they have an interesting vocabulary.
How true.
On that happy note, it's
Yes.
12:06. Shall we press the red button and
Yes.
Let's finish in prayer.
let us finish in prayer? Who would like to lead a
We give
concluding
thee
prayer?
thanks for these and all the benefits that we have received. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
God
And
bless
give
you
us-
guys.
And give us humility.
Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
God bless.
God bless.
You
Bye-bye.
too, Gary.